You know, growing up and even I would say into young adulthood, I would say I've led a pretty sad life. And you might be wondering, why is this the start of a video? Well, because I'm hoping that by me sharing my story and kind of the beautiful tragedy that what was slash I don't know is not really is anymore, so I guess more was my life. It'll inspire you to keep on going. And the reason is I know how hard it can be growing up as a kid and even into young adulthood, and especially being a man in today's society with everything that's going on. Um, I know that we don't necessarily get the most support, and it really truly is a tragedy for a society where we're trying to achieve equality. You would think we'd also realize that some men, actually more than just sometimes, oftentimes need a little bit of help as well, and they don't feel like they really have anyone that they can turn to, which is unfortunate. But anyway, if you do have a story, I believe the power of storytelling and people telling their stories. I really think it gives people the ability to kind of take back their life when they go through their story, even if it isn't the happiest, and they are in a healthy place to do so. So if you feel like you're in that place, feel free to comment down below your story as well. But I'll just tell you about my story a little bit. So I was born to a single mother, and as part of her wanting to have a good life for me, she, went to college, got a degree, and got a decent job where she could make lots of money. But she had to move away. And the idea always was that I would follow her, but ultimately she left the choice up to me if I wanted to do that, and I ended up saying no, that I would stay with my grandmother, because at that point I had been been kind of growing up in a small town with my grandmother for 7 or 8 years at that point, and it was kind of something I was used to, and the city was scary and different and something I thought was going to just be a terrifying time. So, since my mother left the decision up to me, I decided to stay and finish all of school in a small town. Um, had I known what would happen in middle and high school, I might not have, but that being said, maybe it was good I was in a small town and not the city based on a lot of stuff that happened in my early childhood. Um, but who really can tell? Anyway, so obviously my mother leaving left room for kids, and of course, people in small town are unfortunately very judgmental and quick to make assumptions. And so I would get bullied a lot about my mom not being there and about me not knowing who my biological donor was and all of that. And as a young kid, you take a lot of this stuff to heart, and it starts to weigh on you. I would say the bullying probably started around fourth grade, and it didn't really let up until probably my junior year of high school. And I always seemed to be kind of the constant target for all of the bullies, mainly because it affected me, and it's dumb, right? That having emotions and displaying those emotions would cause you to be a target, but that's just a fact of life, especially if you're a man and you start getting upset. It just makes people want to kind of poke the bear a little bit more. So I dealt with the bullying for about sixth or seventh grade, and then once puberty started kicking in, a lot of my sadness and probably depression and anxiety. I actually faked being sick several times to avoid going to school because there were days that I would wake up and I just knew I would not be able to deal with the day, so I would fake being sick just so I didn't have to go to school. And obviously, I would do all my homework. Like my grandmother would go pick up my homework and I'd do my homework at home and then turn it in. But I definitely skipped out on some school days that I probably should not have just because I was that terrified of actually going into school. I actually faked illness quite a bit. Believe it or not, I have always had a fairly decent constitution to where I actually don't get sick too often. And it is a blessing. I recognize that it's something that occurs. Unfortunately, when I do get sick, I get really sick. But so by me faking getting sick, it made me seem like I was a sicker kid than I actually was. And obviously in school, you're going to get those, colds, flus, those yucky school germs that you're always going to get. But I definitely played it up a lot more often than I probably needed to, and my grandmother would let me stay home some of those days, and so I got to avoid some school days. About the time I got to seventh grade, I finally had enough of bullying, and so I would, if someone bullied me enough, I would actually, and especially when they would get physical, I would fight back. The unfortunate thing about growing up in a small town is there's a lot of political and bureaucratic things, especially when it comes to family names. And my family name was not any big it family name, so it pretty much doomed me to a fate of I'd always be the one getting in trouble and the other person wouldn't, even though there's supposed to be a zero tolerance policy. Um, Turns out it was only zero tolerance when the person getting bullied decided to fight back. So there were a couple times I would end up in school suspension, and the middle school principal was honestly kind of the one of the worst principals that I had going through, only trumped by probably my high school principal my senior year, um, being the absolute worst principal that I ever had. And so I would obviously get in trouble, and I'd have to do in school suspension, um, which kind of was good sometimes because it was something that got me out of having to deal with all of the other kids just being in school. Suspension, I'd only ever have to go to the principal's office and then just do my schoolwork and coursework there. Um, but the bullying definitely had an effect to where it has made me a sad soul, and I would even say now, even though I've gotten over most of these things, I still am a very sad soul. And I wouldn't say that the sadness is only reflected in how I was treated as a kid, because obviously, if I said that, one, everyone in the comments section is going to say, "Well, you should be over it by now." Blah blah blah. It's one of those things where when you go through traumatic experiences, and I would classify how I was treated as a kid by my cohorts, a fairly traumatic experience. You're not the same. You truly aren't, and it's unfortunately something that people who don't have traumatic experiences will never understand, and they won't. But there are plenty of people who have had them and can relate to you. So if you ever have the opportunity to find a support group or even go through therapy where they are set up to help you kind of process some of these things, I would recommend doing it because that's actually what I ended up doing. I would say towards the middle of my 20s is when I started seeing therapists and really getting, because at the time I would just shove like all these, you know, typical typical man, I would just shove my emotions way down, and I would not really try and fill them, which would just end up causing me to be just frustrated and angry and anxious and depressed all the time. Especially when I got into high school and you're just trying to figure out what you're gonna do after you get out of high school and everything. Um, And I would shove it down. I wouldn't say that I necessarily. I mean, there were times that I definitely felt so numb that I just didn't feel emotions at all. And I really think junior year that set in place quite well, so that's why the bullying stopped getting as bad. Um, and I would avoid every opportunity to interact with any of my cohorts or the fellow students. Um, The one the one bonus that did happen in high school is that I was able to take a weightlifting course, and I realized that I like lifting weights. The struggle of trying to lift heavy weights and do all of this stuff, it was something that actually appealed to me. Mainly because it was a way that I could kind of release my frustrations in a healthy way and be overall more physically fit as a result of it. And weightlifting is still something I do fairly regularly. I would say this year I haven't done it as regularly because of just different things that have happened this year. But it's something that I definitely really got into, and it has actually been proven to help with depression and anxiety and even kind of metabolism and um, your ability to sleep. Physical exercise in some sort, and especially weightlifting, has been shown to be a benefit to all those things. So, after high school, my young adulthood, when I was in college, I was kind of just busy. So, I didn't have to think necessarily of all of the traumatic experiences I went through, and I finally in my young adulthood, I finally made some actual friends. I had a couple friends in high school that I would hang out with, and they were they'd be good close companions throughout my later years of high school. Um, but really, college was when I started to finally get out there and develop a friend group and realize that maybe I'm not really truly as bad of a person as everyone in high school made me believe. Like maybe I'm truly am not completely unlikable. And that's when I kind of started feeling really, really upset about um, everything that had gone on through middle school, high school. I also really had not dated a whole lot before going to college. I did date a couple, a couple of obviously when I was in high school. I did date a couple of girls and tried to date one my senior year, and that ended up being pretty much a nightmare. And a long story and something we can go into. Really, kind of the person who made me very, very jaded towards women for quite a while, and really probably slightly misogynistic, but maybe I mean maybe just a little bit. Uh, and it's something that I definitely have worked on quite a bit in since going to therapy in my 20s. Anyway, so in college, the reason I'm saying all this is because in college, I actually, and this is going to be weird, for me to say, considering the amount of people that have told me I'm attractive in recent years, and even in early college that I was actually fairly attractive. But one of the things, and one of the lies, really, I had been led to believe when I was in high school was that I was ugly, and I was never gonna win anyone over with looks, and I was no one was ever gonna say I was handsome or anything. I just had to be an overall general good person, and that was it. I just had to do what makes sense and um, do what's right in dating. Um, but during college, I actually was pursued by a number of women, and admittedly, I did not handle that correctly either. Um, I had never really been the center of attention for many women, and so probably some women still hold grudges for how the dating ended up going, and what ended up cons- conspiring. That sounds evil. But what ended up happening when we tried to date and everything that went on. And actually, for a while, I would admit that I would say that I thought, well, if I get a woman, then everything's gonna be fine. And turns out that's a very toxic mentality, and it's a mentality that unfortunately a lot of women also carry. Is like, if I get a partner, then everything will just be fine. It's something that and men do this too, for sure. Me being a perfect example of that. But people seem to think that, oh, well, if I'm just in a relationship, everything will be fine, or if I'm just dating someone, everything will be fine. And it wasn't until I learned in my late 20s that that is, in fact, not true. Um, I dated, so about when I turned 25, I started seeing a therapist. And I also started dating someone I should have never dated, to be quite honest. I think as you age, you probably have a few of those stories of like, yeah, I probably should have not dated him ever. It was a really dumb decision, but it was a decision I made nonetheless, and I let that go on for far too long. I should have actually squashed that far sooner than I did, but unfortunately, the bullying and everything, and I did not have good self worth, and I just didn't really know how to navigate, you know, um, when women are into you and you're you're not completely into them. I didn't know how to navigate that. It was not something that I ever learned, and I always am a firm believer in giving people chances, but that was one chance I should have never gave. So yeah, just a lot of bad things came out of that relationship. Um, and it probably actually made my life worse. In fact, some of the ways that relationship sucked was that it felt like I was being back in high school where I was getting bullied all over again, except this was from a partner that this was happening. Um, so it really, when I got out of that relationship, I was a mess and really wrecked. And honestly, if I had not been consistent with going to therapy, and I probably would actually still be in that relationship and miserable. But also, if I was not consistent with going to therapy, I probably would not be here to actually tell my story. Um, because I would have just given up. And believe me, there are times that I tried for sure. And I would never recommend it. And it was dumb that I even thought that would be a possible solution. It ruined way more friendships than it should have, and it actually ruined one relationship I had, um, just because I could not control my emotions, and I would spiral, and I would catastrophize, and I would just kind of essentially become lost within myself and just not be able to think clearly, which unfortunately led to these thoughts of me, not being here, being a better solution than me being here. Which, if you ever think that way, reach out to someone. I will unfortunately tell you that I know it can be really, really difficult to reach out to someone because you're afraid that you're gonna lose them as a friend or as something more. And the unfortunate truth of that reality is you may, but if they run away because you have these feelings and these thoughts, then you kind of know who your true friends are. And I've been fortunately blessed to have a few true friends that have stuck through kind of the worst of my times. So I've been fortunate in that regard. So yeah, I will say that my thoughts on that matter did end up ruining a lot of friendships, and I honestly have not made that many new friendships to replace them. I've actually just really kind of gotten closer with the friends I do have, that did stick around. And yeah, I mean, I have a few. I like at this point, quality is better than quantity. Um, it's better to have a few quality friends who are there for you through thick and thin, rather than having a bunch of friends who flake on you at, at the very moment that they can. Um, and I know this sounds like this isn't getting better, but I do want to say that even though I've experienced more loss this year than I have in my entire life, and kind of the sort of deeper loss that you would have when you lose a very dear loved one, um, because obviously my grandmother passed, and then two dogs that I was really close with passed, and so it's been a lot of loss this year. Um, I've also gained a lot. I've gained a lot of wisdom. I've gained a lot of serenity, um, this year working with my current therapist, and I've just gained a new appreciation for life. And yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say everything's better. Obviously there's still days where I'm more sad than others. I just know how to handle those days a lot better. Um, and I am not that shy when people ask me, "Are you sad today?" I say yes. If I am, I don't bullshit. Or how are you doing today? I'll straight up tell them I'm not doing great today. To be honest. Thanks for asking. So I don't mince words, and I don't necessarily disallow myself to feel my emotions. Um, and yeah, sure, there's definitely frustration. In fact, driving home today, I was frustrated because I felt sad, and because of this sadness that I carry, and this that I probably will always carry, for the rest of my life. I can't enjoy things that I used to enjoy when I was younger, like a sunset or an overcast day, because it just makes me sad. It kind of like, I don't know what it necessarily does to my mood. I'm sure there's a scientific reason that I get sad on these days that used to be what I are on these things that I used to enjoy. Um, but I can truly say that even in sadness, there is beauty in the world, and there's beauty in people too. You just have to know where to look at it or look for it, and you've got to find the people who really make you feel like life is worth being there for. Um, and even, I wouldn't say even just the people. You've got to find the reasons that life is worth living, and even though this life can be terribly sad, it can be terribly bitter, angry, hateful, whatever negative emotion you want to associate with life, it can be just as beautiful. And that's why I call life the beautiful tragedy that it is, because we only have one life while we're on this earth, and you're only here for a brief moment in history. Um, Millions and billions of people have come before you. Millions and billions and trillions more will come after you. But what you do with your time now, that's what really matters. You know, um, I hope that now that I've kind of come to this realization that once I get older, I will not have regrets, and I will not have disdain for how my life started out, but I will instead remember the beauty and really truly the joy, um, that came once I really found my peace and serenity. And I hope that every single one of you feels the same. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you have a story to share and you are willing and in a healthy mindset to share it, um, please share it, because I think you'll find that there is truly not that many of us that are truly alone out here, and someone knows how you're feeling, and you can always feel free to talk to them in the comments. Maybe make friendships in the comments. I don't know. I have heard of that happening, but yeah, just keep living your beautiful tragedy, my friends.